and I look forward to being able to move forward with a different agenda, focusing on some very serious and key issues that we have here. More than anything, I hope that you'll consider voting for me. 20 years in office is a long time, and I think it's time for change. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
To when we get calls from the senior constituents of this community to go ahead and say, we know where to direct you to get those services at the local level, at the state level, or the federal level, I look forward to providing that continued access through my office to the members of this community. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the first question, and Mr. Potter, you're going to start, is can we add roads or improve the roads into the peninsula?
Well, I just addressed it, the 68 corridor, where I think we've got some safety problems, but I will tell you that I don't think you can pave your way out of this problem. I think you're going to have to look at some incremental improvements along the 68 corridor. I'm a supporter of the transportation tax initiative that the transportation agency is proposing because I think it provides incremental solutions to the problems that we have here. But if you look at this community, we're an international destination served by one-lane highways. 68, Highway 1, and 156 are two-lane highways, one out, one in, and we need to go ahead and figure out better ways to get in and out of here. But I don't think you're going to be able to pave your way out of this solution. Otherwise, you should be able to get from one side of LA to the other in about 20 minutes.
Ms. Adams.
I think what we need are some creative approaches to what we have to deal with. And we do have limited access. We've got 2 lanes in and 2 lanes out. And I think what we need to do is focus on some incentives around mass transportation. I think that we should be working with the hospitality industry to encourage visitors, as well as residents, but visitors as well, to consider leaving their cars either at a park and ride or at CSUMB and coming into town with a special shuttle, and then have bicycles that they can use as they commute through the local cities, enjoying restaurants, using the trolley that we have here. But once again, there needs to be an incentive for people to do this. Those are just some of the creative thoughts that I have as far as what we can do for traffic.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Adams, how would you move forward with regulations for legalizing, controlling, and collecting funds from one of the largest sectors of the county budget? That is the STRs in the unincorporated areas of the county, including coastal areas.
So it's short-term rentals, not
short-term rentals.
transmittable
I'm sorry.
disease. Yeah. I was just interpreting.
That was good.
You don't need to mansplain, dear.
Actually, I didn't know, so that's okay.
That's what I thought. I wasn't trying to help Mary.
No comment. Well, again, short-term rentals is a big issue. And I know one of the things that I hear about from all over the county. I've met with people who are for short-term rentals and people who are against short-term rentals. But I hear something continuously, and it's their frustration with the fact that the county has not come forth with an ordinance. People are happy to follow the ordinance as long as the county would simply move forward in making one. I think the city of Pacific Grove should be held up as a model because you have been moving forward with short-term rentals. Short-term rentals in the coastal zone are actually illegal, but they are going on now. The county is collecting the TOT from some of those short-term rentals. I think we need to have an ordinance that has some teeth in it for enforcement so that people are not forced to turn against their neighbors by turning on people. I think we need to have 24-hour hotlines so that people who do have the problems of short-term rentals in their homes can call the hotline, and there would be enforcement of the ordinance if it ever gets passed.
Thank you. Mr. Potter?
Thank you. So, a race towards ordinance is probably not a good way to go, and I would advertise that a better way to go is to do a long process that involves a lot of stakeholder outreach. Because if you look at the 5th District, we're not the same in every section of this district. Big Sur doesn't look like Pebble Beach doesn't look like Carmel Valley. And yet, if you look at where the short-term rentals are in Monterey County, they're not in Chular, they're not in Prunedale, they're all in the 5th District. And so when we look at how to move forward, I would say PG has been a model for a process that's in definition. We look at this project and we say, okay, where do we want them? How many do we want? How are we going to regulate? And how much money are we going to see in revenue? I think one of the charming things about this is that the revenue was under-anticipated. It was actually anticipated to be about 300, crept well over $500,000, and all of a sudden we realized how profitable it is. But certain areas it's not going to fix and fit, and certain areas it's going to fit. And so we have to work through those communities to find out what it is that they want and what it is that they can tolerate.
Thank you. Okay, next question, and Mr. Potter, you're going to start. 85% of Americans get their water from public agencies. Corporate water invariably costs more than public water. What's your position on the public owning the Cal-Am water facilities?
So I don't have a problem at all with public ownership, but I don't think it should be driven by an initiative process. I think it should be driven by a policy-making process, and I would suggest that the best agency to drive that process would be the Water Management District. I've been on that Water Management District for a while, and I think right now it's positioned such that if you take a look at how would you acquire that district, how would you then govern it, how would you go ahead and fund it, and what's the value of that asset. But an initiative process puts too many things forward that may not have been thought out in their entirety. So I'd advocate for having the Water Management District be the lead in that discussion and see where that goes. I'm not interested in having that discussion right in the middle while we're trying to solve our overpumping of the Carmel River and have the cease and desist order drop on our heads, which is going to have a negative impact on not just the businesses in this community, but even more so on the residents of this community.
Ms. Adams?
I also agree that public-owned water is a good idea. I must say that the reason there are initiatives, though, is because initiatives are needed when government does not have the courage to take action. And I think an absence of leadership is one of the reasons why we are in the position that we are now. For someone who served on the Water Management District for 20 years, to find us in the same position that we are now is a very distressing kind of problem. I agree that we need to have the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District work in concert with all of the other water management districts, because there are more than just one. The Mayor's Authority is another example. I think we also need to look at our water situation in a far more global sense, and definitely in a regional sense. There is no lettuce curtain when it comes to the water. We really do need to work much more closely with our associates from the other side of the county, and I really like the pure water approach of using reclaimed wastewater from the ag industry to use in appropriate ways.
Thank you. All right, next question, and Ms. Adams, you're going to start. How do you address the increase in the need for services in light of budget constraints, and are there federal or state funds that we could use to help us?
Well, I think everything needs to be prioritized. The budget is one of the most important things that the Board of Supervisors should be overseeing, and it all has to do with prioritization. Definitely there are some things in the budget that are absolutely required and we have no leeway to work with it. But there are other things that we need to look at and have a better strategic approach to things. It saddens me because my view from working with the county as I did, and I know virtually all of the department heads, and I had good relationships with each of the individual supervisors. However, it was always dealing with the supervisors as individuals. There are simply too many silos within the Board of Supervisors. In my opinion, if we were working more as an aggregate group and setting group priorities that everyone agreed to, we would have a far better chance of really ensuring that our county and our communities can thrive.
Thank you. Mr. Potter?
So I have absolutely no idea what Mary's talking about when she said siloed Board of Supervisors. Honestly, the county has maintained a solid credit rating. We've had a balanced budget every single year I've been on the board, even during the most critical times, the worst times in the history of this nation. We have gone ahead and had a balanced budget, and that has been through a collaborative process with all of the department heads working together. When I got on the board 20 years ago, those departments were siloed. They worked separately to protect their own budget balances, but that has changed, and it has changed significantly to where we figure out what social services can do to help out the clinics, what planning can do to help out the roads department, what we can do as ag commissioners to help out the parks department. And that's collaborative budgeting. I have no idea what you're talking about when you're being that critical of a county that's been able to maintain a solid budget rating, a credit rating, and not at the expense of the employees. We have not cut services. We have actually been able to maintain and, when good times, enhance services. So it's easy to criticize, but I think that's a pretty harsh criticism that's unfounded.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. All right, the next question is going to be started by you. And the question is, please describe your position on Monterey Downs development, the entire development, not just the racing aspects.
Well, I'd love to do that. Unfortunately, by law, I'm precluded from entering an opinion, because if I do and then I take an action on that project, and I think Mary will even agree with me on this, that then we have registered a bias and a prejudice and we can't opine. I will, though, enter areas of concern that I would be concerned about. And I'd be concerned about those issues regardless of where the project is, even if it's the affordable housing project that is at the doorstep of this community as part of the Pebble Beach project. What are the water impacts? What are the transportation impacts? What are the environmental impacts? There's a process called the environmental EIR review process, and that is the process that flushes out all of the issues. That document has not been before me, but when it comes before me, I intend to be just as critical of that document as I have of any other project that's been before me. And my reputation as far as going ahead and saying no to wrong projects is pretty solid.
Thank you, Ms. Adams.
With all due respect, we wouldn't even be talking about Monterey Downs had it not been brought here by your pal.
Can you explain that?
I'd like to continue with my answer, and I have to agree that I am unable to say a specific statement against a project, any project, for the same reasons that that Dave referred to. That should we be put into a judicial type position, we could not, we would have to recuse ourselves from voting, because we would already have made up our minds. So I would not be able to speak against it. But I agree, and I would certainly make my decision about any project that would come before me. Is there water for it? What does it do to the traffic? Does it benefit the entire community or just a few special interests? What does it do to the environment? And does it provide really long-term, sustaining, well-paid positions, or will they be entry-level minimum wage jobs? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Ms. Adams, you're going to start, which is, with the FORA organization going away, what are the implications to the county in terms of transition plans, such as implementing habitat conservation plans and long-term management reporting in Fort Ord?
I think that at this point, there is still some question on whether FORA would be allowed to go a little further than it has, as far as the length of its of the work that it's been doing. And I know that there are many small parts of the overarching FORA that will continue to function. So my expectation and hope is that the various jurisdictions that oversee the various parts of land that exist within within Fort Ord, within the former Fort Ord, will still be able to deal with the problems that are brought forward.
Okay. Mr. Potter?
So this is actually a very relevant question, because I don't know if everybody realizes that in 2020, the Fort Ord Reuse Authority goes away. And that is the agency that actually governs the reuse of Fort Ord. The largest base closure in the United States, 27,000 acres, 20,000 acres put into open space, habitat, and recreation. Their mission, that job of ESCA cleanup, the Environmental Service Cooperative Agreement, that goes ahead and tells how are we going to clean up this space, what is cleanup going to look like, what is cleanup going to be, will not be done. The HCP, the Habitat Conservation Plan, will not be implemented. Who's going to pay for that? How is that going to get done? We already extended FORA once, and we extended it to 2020. I don't think the political will on the FORA board is to go ahead and continue to do that, but I'd ask you, do you really want to turn over the future of Fort Ord to the jurisdictions that abut that property, or do we want to continue the mission that we originally said we would do, and that was collaboratively, as a Monterey community, plan for the reuse of that base? I don't think we want to leave that question up to others.
Thank you. Okay. Next question, and Mr. Potter, you're going to start. What does smart growth mean to you?
So smart growth to me means that you don't build on ag land, you don't build on the coast, and you don't build in Carmel Valley. You build close to services. I would look at the project that was done out at Fort Ord, the East Garrison project, which has an arts district. It has a community center, a town center. It has recreational facilities. It has affordable housing, and it has entry-level housing. That is a project that we championed. It was approved unanimously by the Board of Supervisors, and that would be one of the few projects I've ever seen unanimously approved by the board because it had the components that we really talk about when we talk about affordability, livability, compatibility, and accessibility. And I think that's what we should be talking about. I'd like to see more projects like that.
Thank you. Ms. Adams.
When I think of smart growth, I think of growth that serves the benefit of all. I like to think of smart growth as projects where there is an existing infrastructure so that we aren't carving up mountainsides to put very expensive homes. I also think of, when I think of it, I think of places that are walkable, places that are bikeable. I think of places that have workforce housing and jobs that are there so that the workers are able to walk to their jobs. I think of economic development when I think of smart growth and how we can position the community in a way that benefits from the development. I love the idea of being smart about any kind of growth. And I think that's really what we have to do. We have to put the best thought forward when it comes to what we want to do with growth. Because it's too easy for us to lose what it is that we have here by just rampant development throughout many different parts of the county.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Adam, next question. What is your position on protecting the environment, particularly the Monterey pine forest? Will you work to stop fragmenting it?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that I live in the forest, so I have a very special feeling for the forest. I also like the thought of being able to work and enjoy the trails that we have throughout the forest. I'm conscious of the health of the forest, and I think we have to be sure that we're protecting that. I would want to ensure that when there are years like this, when so many trees go down, that we're able to remove the trees so that the forest can continue to grow. I would be definitely in favor of protecting the forests in many ways, and I'm not sure what you mean by fragmentation of the forest, but I would think that it's important for us to ensure that there are trees that are just left, because so many of the trees that we have here are actually the home of them, that it's where the trees come from. The Monterey pine to be specific, and we really have to be sure that we protect that because it's the only place one of the two places in the world where the trees are actually native, and that's a really important thing for us to be sure to protect.
Okay, Mr. Potter?
So the largest native Monterey pine forest is on the Monterey Peninsula. Jack's Peak Park is a classic example of that forest. It is not fragmented. It has been preserved in perpetuity. One of the things that I've advocated for, and I'm very glad to see, is that surrounding property that was owned by the Pebble Beach Company, the Regional Parks District has stepped forward and said, you know, that's property worth preserving. We should purchase that property, and we should go ahead and make sure that that connectivity continues to exist, because those are actually single-family zone parcels that are primed for development. I've advocated that the Regional Parks District should actually take over the management of Jack's Peak. It's a county park, but as long as the mission is the same and the public awareness of the value of that resource is emphasized, I think that's a very, very appropriate partnership. As long as we're on the same mission, we ought to partner with agencies like that understand it's about recreation, it's about access, and it's about education of these resources. I'm excited to see that opportunity coming forward.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Potter, you're going to start the next question. Would you promote a campaign finance ordinance for such as this, as it exists in the city of Pacific Grove? Why or why not?
So the last time I ran, when I ran, Ron Cheshire from the Carpenters Union stepped forward and said, hey, Dave, you know, how about campaign finance reform? And I said, you know what, I'm all over that. I think that's a great idea. So I brought it forward under a board referral. Staff took it, started assessing it, and I got accused of blocking the people who were running in the next election cycle. Apparently, since I got elected and I had unrestricted financing, that all of a sudden I was trying to regulate the next group of people that were coming through. That wasn't my intention. I was trying to level the field. I would have brought it up this time, but I think I probably would have gotten criticized by my opponent. So I think that if we could get a community upswell, if that's what we ought to do, that'd be a great idea. But when it's advocated for by a politician, it seems to look a little suspect. And I gave it a try. I'm happy to do it again, but I'd appreciate some support on this issue.
Ms. Adams?
Well, when I'm your next supervisor, that's one of the first things I would have on my docket. I really think that it's important for us. As someone who came from the not-for-profit sector, I realize how much money is being spent on these campaigns and the good that it could be doing for issues like homelessness. It really makes me sad to realize how much money we're all spending here. The County of Santa Cruz has a wonderful process in place that limits very severely campaign contributions, and they seem to be able to elect extremely good and very kind of creative supervisors. So I think that we should certainly be able to do it here. And I think it just takes starting. You know, I mean, I'm sure there's always going to be somebody who's going to be complaining about this, but I believe that the public's will, the general people who are sitting in this room, us, are the people who really would want to see campaign finance reform. And I would certainly advocate for it.
Thank you. Ms. Adams, you're going to start the next question. Okay. I live in Carmel Valley. When Laguna Seca Racetrack has races, I can hear them at my house, which is 4 miles away. As noise pollution is like tobacco smoke, why not make Laguna Seca track electric vehicles only?
That is my favorite question. You know, wouldn't that be terrific? Even if it wasn't the entire season of racing, wouldn't it be just great to have one big race where all of the electric vehicles, you know, got out there and went through their paces? I think that would be kind of terrific. I'm sad that there are so many issues that come up around Laguna Seca and around Scramp. It's been a very challenging time for so many of the volunteers who've worked at that racetrack for years and years and years. There are 3 generations of people who have worked at Laguna Seca. And I know that it's been very frustrating because all of a sudden, people felt like they were sort of getting slammed up against the head, unknowing that they had been that there were so many issues going on with the racetrack. As far as the noise pollution that exists in Carmel Valley, you know, I don't mean to sound hard-hearted, but the truth of the matter is the track was there when many people bought their homes, and I know that that's a problem. But it's, you know, it's something that we can look at. We can try to talk about the whole thing with Scramp, with the racetrack will change this year anyway. I'm thinking.
Thank you. Mr. Potter.
So there have been a couple of proposals to actually have it as a test track for alternative fuel vehicles. Some manufacturers wanting to come out and be able to demonstrate their vehicles at that track, not a race specific, but an opportunity to go ahead and demonstrate what those vehicles are capable of doing on those available race days. I've supported that. I thought that was a good idea, and I would hope that would come forward. I think Mary's gone slightly off topic, but said that, you know, what about the future of Scramp and the future of the track? I think there's actually a good future for Scramp out there as long as they're financially viable. I think we have to all recognize that if anybody in the private sector came out, was going to manage, let's say this building, for example, guaranteed to keep it up, guaranteed that they would make money, and guaranteed that they would invest in the facility, that didn't happen, and there was bills owed, that we would question that operation. That's all that happened. When another agency, another company came in and said, what can we do here? We said, you have to work with Scramp. Scramp said, we can't work with these people. And they said, okay, fine, we're not going to do that. We're going out for an RFP and we'll see who shows up. But I don't see Scramp going away, frankly.
Okay. All right, stop. Thank you. All right, next question. And
I think it's
you're
me.
starting it.
I'm happy to.
Yes, all right. This is about earthquake and other disaster preparedness. The Fukushima disaster is now in its 6th year. What measures can and should the county take to help educate and warn its residents about disasters?
So since I've been in office, and it has nothing to do with me, but we've had a fair amount of disasters within the 5th District. We've had the floods of '98. We've had the fires, the Basin Complex fire. We just recently had the Pfeiffer fire. We just recently had the Kashawa fire and the Laurelis Grade fire. One of the things that I'm proudest about my office, and some of them are here tonight, Kathleen Lee on the front line, we respond incredibly well to those constituent concerns. We get that first call. We've got a mudslide. Our road is out. Big Sur is isolated. What are we going to do? And people think it's all about the public safety issues, the human life and safety issues. It's also about, what about our pets? What about our livestock? What are we going to do for food? How are we going to get those services down there? There's no office other than mine that's had more experience with dealing with natural disasters in Monterey County than the 5th District. Anytime you build a highway on the last 100 feet of a coastline, it's probably not the best place to build a road, but we respond very quickly.
Ms. Adams?
I think all of us live in fear for the day that the big one is going to hit, and what are we going to do when that happens? I think that we're fortunate to have some excellent volunteer groups that work alongside the county offices as far as the response team. CERT is one example. When I was at United Way, we started a program called 211 that is a free information and referral service. And when we started that, one of the reasons that we did it is that it takes the pressure off 911 in times of disaster. And it was really interesting because we were called into play. We had a seat at the table within the Office of Emergency Services and had the opportunity to see up close and personal what needs to be done during times of disaster. So I think that there are a lot of things that we have to look at. I think one of the things that we need to encourage a bit more that we aren't doing enough of, in my mind, is public outreach so that the public is aware and prepared. I think that's an important element of what we need to do as far as disaster preparedness.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Adam, you'll start this one. What actions would you take to ensure an adequate supply of water for our peninsula?
Well, I would just get my magic wand and, I believe in a portfolio approach to water in our county. I think that we have to continue to conserve as much as we have. I know that the rains have made us slack off a little bit, and I see that we are not conserving to the degree that we have before, but I think that's one key part of our portfolio. I think we also need to ensure that we keep the aquifers fully charged. I think we have to ensure that the groundwater is captured. I think we also have to work with the program that I mentioned before, the water reclamation projects. Pacific Grove, I believe, has one already. I know Pebble Beach certainly does. But using the wastewater from the agricultural runoff, essentially, and treat it so that it can be used again. I also think that we need as many oars in the water as we can working on this project. I don't think that we should have an exclusive group that just looks at the issues around water. I think we really need to be open to as many different creative solutions because we live in an arid area.
Thank you. Mr. Potter?
So I will be a tad more specific. I'm a desal supporter. I actually think that there's a viable solution out there with an infinite source of water out there that's not subjective to the whims of Mother Nature. People will argue that desal is expensive. I don't disagree. But what is going to be that project? At the moment, it appears to be the CalAm project that's moving forward. But we have to realize there's two other projects out there. And one of the reasons why the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District was willing to fund a part of the environmental review process for the Deepwater project was for the very reason that if CalAm's project doesn't come along in time and another project moves forward, and the Deepwater desal project does have a lot of very viable components. And I think that if we're going to get delayed, then I'm going to be more than willing to pick up the next project that steps ahead. There are other projects out there. We lead this state in conservation. We have major portions of reclaimed water projects for golf courses and agriculture. But right now, we need a source that goes ahead and is deliverable and implementable in the very near future.
Thank you. All right. This is the last question. Mr. Potter, you're going to start. No, that's not going to work.
And why not?
Well, all right, you can, go ahead.
I don't want, if it doesn't work, I don't want to.
No. Sorry.
It's a little ominous.
That was me thinking.
No, go ahead.
That was me thinking aloud. We're going to do it in this order, but then for the final
Oh, you're right, because
opening.
then I'll start for the close.
That's right, you're
I
going
get
to
it.
start for the
Yeah,
close
you're right.
anyway,
Right,
so
okay,
go
fine,
ahead.
Whatever.
Go. So the next question is, what is your position on the location of the Pebble Beach affordable housing?
So I will start with the original caveat that I had on the Monterey Downs project, but I will say that as you, as a community, take a look at that project, take a look at the environmental review process, take a look at the EIR, take a look at the alternatives analysis component of that project, and say, is there an alternative site that works better? Is it the Sunset Center, the Sunset Patio project over there? Is it a piece of the old Capitol site? Are there other pieces of that project that you can argue for? Because if you just stand up and say, we don't like it here and we don't like it because, that's not an alternative. That's just an opposition position. And I would suggest that you use that document to go ahead and build your case if you don't like it where it's proposed. I think that we all want affordable housing. We all say we need it, but we've got to have the courage at some point to say, these are not people that we want to put somewhere else. We want them to be a part of our community. We're an inclusionary community. We don't want them ostracized or segregated, but we want to figure out where's the best location, and that's the alternatives analysis process.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
I think it's been a very sensitive issue here, and I'm certainly conscious of that with the people who live in Pacific Grove. And I've heard, again, both sides of the discussion around it. I agree. I think workforce housing is absolutely critical, and we have to have workforce housing in a place where workers are. And it appears as if this is going to be a project that would work well for the workers at Pebble Beach. As I have driven by and looked at the area, it pleases me that I think it's fewer. I think it's 725 trees that will be taken down, far fewer than the 43,000 at Monterey Downs. But I also like it that there's going to be 10.5 acres that's left for open space, and I think that's really good. My hope and expectation is that the people who live in the surrounding neighborhoods, well, as David said, really embrace the new people to the neighborhood. Someone had told me that there was a drone picture that showed that the houses and many of the people that are nearby that are complaining about losing the trees there, their houses were once trees as well.
Thank you. All right, now it's time for the sum-ups, and Mr. Potter, you get to start.
And how long do we have? A minute?
A minute.
Okay, I'll speed date on this thing. There are a myriad of issues out there, and I pride myself on being able to address those issues. I touched on them when I first spoke, but I think what we need to realize is that when you have an issue, regardless of what the community is, what is the responsiveness out of the office that you call? And my office has got an incredible level of experience, an understanding of these communities, and it's not just Pacific Grove. When somebody calls from King City, when somebody calls from Prunedale, they come to our office. They don't necessarily even go to the supervisor of that district's office because of the 40 years of combined understanding of what goes on in Monterey County that my office provides. Kathleen Lee knows me better probably than my wife. Jane Mohammadi in my office has been incredible in providing Kathleen the success. And Brian Flores at the front desk, he can usually solve your problem when you call, regardless of what your issue is. So when it comes to access, you're not going to have better access than my office as it exists. I'm proud of that.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
People have asked me, and people have advised me, that I need to clarify the difference between Dave and myself. And I want to talk about 3 specific areas where we are different. One is water. And again, I think after 20 years of looking at a problem, it's time for some fresh approaches and some creative looks at it. Also, the inability to get the third vote. I think it's very important that we have the opportunity for projects that are going to be in our district, in the 5th district, to have 3 votes that are on the way that we who sit in this room want to vote. want to see happen. And my experience at United Way and throughout my whole career has been collaborative, relationship building, and that's what I would bring. I think the third is Monterey Downs, and I think we have a different approach to that. And I forgot to mention earlier that I do keep desal as part of my water portfolio, and I was so excited I didn't mention it, so forgive me for that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone, let's give these.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, we want to thank the League of Women Voters. We want to thank our City Council for allowing us to use the room. Thank you very much, and get out and vote.